Welcome to Bucs Insider Live. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. We're coming to you a day earlier than typical because we got a lot going on this week.
Yeah.
We got the schedule released tomorrow, and we've got phase 3 workouts going on, and so we had a little bit of a conflict tomorrow morning, but we still wanted to bring you the show because there's still a lot going on, a lot to talk about right now.
We want to talk to you.
Yes, and so first, as always now, our new tradition, if you've been watching the show lately, we're going to start with a trivia question, which it was embarrassing because Scott wondered if it was too easy, and then I didn't know it. So we decided to use it.
You got close.
I got close. We'll go with that. It's unfortunate close doesn't count in trivia. So let's start with it. Tell us what our trivia question is.
Okay, it is, well, I'll set the scene here. We announced earlier this week what jersey number each of the 8 draft picks got, and for the first time ever, you're allowed to wear 0, and our 3rd round pick from Louisville, Yaya Diaby, chose to wear number 0. So he will be the first one to wear it once he gets into a game. So the only guy that's ever won 0, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the question. Yaya Diaby is set to become the only Buccaneer ever to wear jersey number 0 in a game. What is the only other number that has only been worn by one player in franchise history?
Such a great question. I love
We'll
this.
give you the answer at the end.
Yes, we will give you the answer at the end, and we hope some of you guys get it right. If you know the answer or think you know the answer, leave it underneath our live Facebook video in the comments, and we'll try to show some of those correct answers later in the show if you're one of those people that knows it. So let's go on to our show. We got a new quarterback.
Yeah.
Tell me about this new guy we have signed.
Well, we knew we were going to add at least one, and Jason Light had recently made it clear that it was going to be somebody that at least had some experience. So the player that they signed is John Wolford, who was with the Rams, basically a teammate with Baker Mayfield for about a month last year. He doesn't have a ton of starting experience, but he got a little in 2020, and he started a few games last year. And this is what he's done so far in limited experience, but you see the games played. You see the record as a starter. That looks pretty good, 3-2. It's a teeny bit misleading because he started a postseason game in 2020, but was knocked out of it pretty quickly, and then Jared Goff came back in and finished it, and they won. But to get there, his very first start ever was the last game of that season, and they had to win it in order to make the playoffs, and Jared Goff was out due to injury, so he made his first career start and led them to a victory. And he was actually the first quarterback in his NFL debut to both pass for over 200 yards and rush for over 50 yards in a single game.
Wow.
So it's a guy with a little bit of experience, and obviously he probably has a bit of a relationship with Baker Mayfield too. So
which is nice.
Now we have 3 quarterbacks. You might see one more maybe after the rookie minicamp added, because you often take 4 to training camp, but we needed to have at least 3.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. All right, so now next we also got to hear from some of our position coaches last week. We're going to hear from more today, so make sure you stay tuned to Buccaneers.com for those press conferences. But of the people who spoke last week, one of them was special teams coach Keith Armstrong, which also, I love Keith. Whenever he talks, you always get some really good nuggets. He's a guy that is willing to tell you a lot. He's really passionate about what he does. He doesn't just kind of give this, well, we're going to take one game at a time. Like, he gives you a lot of stuff.
Detail.
A lot of detail. I think he's like, you know what? We don't get talked about a lot on special teams. So when I get my chance, we're going to talk about it. So what were some of the things that you heard from him? Actually,
the special teams coach is a great one to talk to when you're talking about the newcomers to the team, because he's the one who gets them first. You know, a lot of these guys, like say a Servasia Dennis, are probably going to play with him first on special teams before they're mixed into defense. But he actually had a lot of things I found interesting, and he had a few ways in which he thinks the Buccaneers will be better on special teams in the kicking game this year. One of them is our new kicker, Chase McLaughlin, is 17 of 21 in his career from beyond 50 yards, which is pretty amazing. I think you take 17 of 21, period, right? And last year he was 83.3% overall, which was actually better than what we were last year. So if you have that long-range weapon that Brian Suckup was great for the Buccaneers, great, especially in the Super Bowl year. Gave them exactly what they wanted, made all the gimmies. But as of late, it became clear the Buccaneers wanted that long-range weapon, right, that most teams have nowadays. Now, Jake Camarda, on the other hand, was a rookie last year, 4th-round draft pick, which is high for a punter, obviously. But he paid off exactly what they wanted. I mean, he was exactly what the Bucs expected.
Talk about a long-range weapon, right?
Yeah, exactly right. He had a huge leg. He did really well. And he said, Coach Armstrong said, as the season went along, he did better and better at kicking, angle kicking to get it outside the hashes like this. So you're sort of pinning them to the sideline. You're using the sideline as a defender. And he says he thinks Jake is going to get even better than that. Better at that this year, which will make him even more effective because he's getting used to the NFL, because the hash marks in college are different than the NFL, and so you have to, you're aiming for a different spot in the NFL. So if he gets better at that, angling kicks towards the sideline on both sides, then the Buccaneers net punting will get better. Now, it was already great. Look at these numbers for Jake last year. Gross average of 48.8 was the best in team history and 5th in the NFL, 11th and 2nd in team history in net average, and he hit an amazing 15 punts of over 60 yards.
That's incredible.
And only one guy, the Stonehouse guy for Tennessee, had more in the NFL last year. So he's already doing really well, but Keith Armstrong thinks he can do better. And I think the key to point out here is the difference in his ranking between gross and net. Right, that shows you right there that there's more return being allowed, and that's somewhat on the cover men. But also, if he can angle those kicks better and have those guys pinned in, there'll be less return, and the net will come closer to the gross.
Selfishly, I want to see them do some fakes with him because he's such an athlete.
That's right.
He's so fast.
He can run.
He can really run. So, like, I mean, I worked for the Rams when they had Johnny Hecker throwing it a lot because he played quarterback. But I feel like with Jake, it could be more the running side.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure that part of it, of not really doing it as much last year, he's a rookie. Maybe you don't want to throw too much at him or something. But now I'm just like,
remember
really
the play where it got botched and he had to run out to the side? I thought he was going to run around the end, and then he amazingly punted.
That was one of the plays of the whole year. And to think about saying that about a punter says a lot about Jake, which is amazing. All right, and now finally, again, we mentioned schedule coming out tomorrow. We are going to be doing a show talking about it tomorrow night, so make sure you stay tuned to that right after the schedule is released. I believe at 8 p.m. there's going to be a show that we do to talk all about the Bucs one. There's the NFL Network talking about the league at large, but then we're going to talk specifically about the Bucs schedule, so come back for that. For now, let's go ahead and talk about some of the schedule guidelines, changes, things to keep in mind for this year.
Yeah, there's some big differences, and there's a lot of them, to be honest with you. For one thing, Monday Night Football can now be flexed from week 13 on, which they didn't want to do before because people could have plans to go to games, to travel, buy tickets, and maybe you don't want to switch nights on them very often. But they're going to go ahead and do it now in order to try to get better matchups on Monday Night Football towards the end of the season. All games now are free agents for the networks, and you know, it used to be if it was determined mostly by whatever team was on the road. So if it was an NFC team, it was Fox, and if it was an AFC team, it was CBS. That's gone away. So they get to, you know, try to lobby for every game they can. So any game could be on any network this year. You can now be on 2 Thursday night games when it used to be only one. Right. But they're doing that also to get better matchups on the Amazon series, and that means that teams are not guaranteed a primetime game because they used to use those Thursday night games to make sure everybody got at least one primetime game. Some teams will probably not get one. And then one of the really big ones is there's going to be a Black Friday game, so they're going to really, the NFL is going to be all over your TV that entire Thanksgiving weekend.
Wow.
I think they already announced
that
this.
Sounds amazing.
Right? I think they already announced this morning that one's going to be Dolphins versus Jets. They've announced that, and they've announced the international games, and we get the rest tomorrow night. And then you can have a maximum of 6 primetime games now. It could go up to 7 because you can be flexed into another primetime game later on. But that's a lot of changes. We'll see if any of it, you know, matters to the Bucs or not.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. All right, well, we have an answer to our trivia question here. Noel says 63. Is he right?
He is right.
He's right.
And I'll provide some context. You could logically figure this out a little bit if you know enough about Bucs history. So Leroy Selmon was the very first player the Buccaneers ever drafted in the college draft in 1976, their first year. So he was the first one to get number 63. He wore it for about a decade, and then when he retired, they knew how important he was to the franchise, so they sort of unofficially retired his number, just didn't give it to anybody. And then when he went into the Hall of Fame in '95, they officially retired his number. So nobody's had a chance to wear it since.
Look at that. What a great trivia question. All right, well, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider Live. Again, tune in tomorrow night for our show breaking down everything with the Bucs schedule. We'll see you then.